right, so the Blake and Allen not to be named yet podcast discussion post penalty for Martinsville, and here we go. So you've seen the report. I'll rattle off what the penalty was, just so you and I are on the same page. We've both seen it. 100,000 points to each team and driver. So there's 200,000 per 23 team, one team, and three team in total cash. Suspension for the spotter, the crew chief, and the competition director for a single points championship qualifying race. So Phoenix. So nothing that carries over to next year. And it only moves one of those three drivers down in the point standings and ownership standings, which would be Austin Dillon. He was already way down there anyway. And I don't know. One thing we need to look at. Does it move him out of the charter money? Because there's 36 charters. But then charters, I want to say Denny said were paid out, like the top 30 have a certain amount, and then after that or whatever. But so that's what NASCAR handed down.
They're all paid out. It's just if you're in the bottom 3 or 4 3 years in a row, you can get kicked out. You still get paid.
Okay, so it has financial implications. The big thing is there's no penalty to the manufacturers at all.
Nope.
So Toyota has one team being penalized. Chevy has two, but at the end of the day, Chevy still got a car into the Final Four where they weren't going to otherwise, so they won anyway. And when we were talking about $400,000 in fines compared to the however many millions.
No, it's 600,000.
Well, it's 400,000 to Chevy because there's two Chevy teams to one Toyota. 600,000 total, right? But
right.
It's 100,000 to the driver of the one, 100,000 to the team of the one, 100,000 to the three team, 100,000 to Dillon,
and so on.
So if it's $400,000 to Chevy as a whole, even if Dillon and Ross had to pay the fines, they're both well-paid drivers. Granted, that sucks. Most certainly, you would think since Trackhouse and RCR are key partner teams along with Hendrick, they're going to get the money back from Chevy at the end of the year because ultimately Chevy won, right? You agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, without the blockade, they don't have a driver or they don't have a car in the playoff in the championship four. It's 2 Toyotas and 2 Fords, no doubt.
So one thing did you have a chance yet to listen to the Dale Jr. download?
The only thing I've caught up on is Actions Detrimental and Teardown. I was going to start DBC this morning and got tied up with some other things.
Okay, no problem.
I have seen a couple clips from DBC and it was kind of just shaking my head that they don't think that they did anything wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw not Freddie, but Brett. Obviously, he openly said, "I never did anything wrong at Richmond." No, your team went out of business because you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's just more hilariousness than anything that they claim they did nothing wrong, said nothing wrong. Freddie claims he said nothing wrong this week. Obviously, NASCAR disagrees, or they wouldn't be suspending the crew chiefs for all three teams.
He literally said, "Let this group by. Let this group by. Stay high. Let this group by." How did you? He's this many. I think he said he was straight away back. He was telling him where the 20 was.
Yep, and you could hear, in Bubba's radio transmission that he did not want to do this. You could tell from the way he was talking, and Dale Jr. said as much as well. The tone in his voice, he basically was like, "Why the hell do I have to do this for them? They wouldn't do this for me?" More or less is kind of that's not what Dale Jr. said, but that's the tone of voice you kind of get. Like, would they do the same thing for me? And probably not. I mean, and the reason why I say that, not that obviously Denny's in the JGR camp, and tight with Coach and helped put Coach to to the level he is today, but at the same time JGR also put Furniture out of business. So if I'm a partner team, I don't know that I trust JGR to repay the favor. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's I don't see it either.
That's why I think if I was Bubba, I would be hesitant to pull over for the big team, not knowing whether or not we're going to get the payout on the back end. And all you really have to do is even less recent than when Furniture Row ultimately went under due to the the financial costs and the technical alliance and everything with JGR. Look at the pit crews that JGR gave them their farm crews, and anytime somebody was good, they would rob Bubba before they got Reddick and before they got Kurt Busch. And so to the point where Denny had to stand up his own programs because he couldn't build consistent pit crews. Those were his biggest issue. That's not their problem now. You don't hear about their pit crews in the news anymore.
Nope. Nope. They're actually some of the best.
Yep, they're some of the top performing teams, and that's because having an alliance with JGR was actually to 23XI's detriment in that regard. So if you look at it from that standpoint, and again, that's an analytic point. Would you, if you were in the car, would you pull over for them? I know I wouldn't. What are they going to do? They're not the ones that write my paycheck. They're not the sponsor of my car. They don't build my engines. TRD does. And I'm most certain that Michael Jordan is somebody more to fear and answering to for my job than, Joe Gibbs in this scenario.
Just a update. It's not the team. What did you say? The team. It's actually a team executive, not the competition director.
I thought they said the competition director in one of the tweets.
Nope, it's a team executive.
Okay, so they lost a team executive, but they didn't name the position. I want to say one of them. I thought I saw where it said. Wait, was it Jeff Gluck's tweet? Then maybe he said.
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
It says crew chief, spotter, team exec.
Bob Pockrass's, I thought, said competition director.
I'll look at it real quick.
So that makes me think there's just maybe one is implying which team executive versus which. Maybe you can pick the team executive.
Possibly. Let's see.
And obviously, it says they're all going to appeal and they'll all be expedited this week.
It says competition executives.
Okay, competition executives. So they'll pick whoever that third person is. But the spotter and the crew chief are definitely gone for this race. Which, with remote technology, they're all basically they will just broadcast from home base. Okay, whoop-de-doo.
Like Keith Rodden's the one for RCR.
Okay.
Dave Rogers for... So it does sound like the competition directors.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say one of the tweets, I thought they would basically implied that, so.
Yeah. His says competition executive and Jeff Gluck says different, but same thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Definitely we want to be accurate. And because you can't have a proper contextual conversation if you don't have all the correct facts. So, in my discussion, where I posted the other day, I said I felt like each team should be fined an astronomical amount of money. The manufacturer should be fined an astronomical amount of money, and you should suspend them from 1 to 2 races. And literally, you will not get to put a car on the track. That will drive home to the manufacturer, to the team, that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. And the one thing again, I thought my suggestion was heavy-handed, and maybe it potentially puts a team out of business. Again, I don't think any of those three are in danger of going out of business. I mean, maybe 23XI, they're in the lawsuit. We'll see how that goes for them, how much money they spend, but I don't think so. They've got a guy who all he has to do is release a shoe line, and then bam, there's your fine money. So I'm not too worried about 23XI. Justin Marks with Pitbull, all right, Mr. Worldwide, I don't think he's going to go broke with Justin Marks, and RCR's not going anywhere. So I think they're all safe from a financial standpoint of that. But what do you think is possible to be done to drive home the point? Because I don't think the points penalty they laid out is a deterrent. I don't because especially if you're Chevy, what deterrent is there? I still got a car in the Final Four, so I'm still eligible for that Four payout fund that's associated with the TV money, the manufacturer championship. I'm still going to have a car on the driver's side and in the owner's point side where I can still win this and have a healthy lead, which all ties into that.
The problem stems from the race audio from the spotters and the drivers. You know, the one spotter said, or the driver said, "Does the one know the deal?" And the spotter's like, "I'm pretty sure he does." You know, where did the deal come from? Did the deal come from HMS? The deal come from Chevy? Did William Byron talk to somebody and go, "Hey, block for me"? You know, I think that's why, as much as I hate it, I think that's why that possibly NASCAR can't do much, because they don't know where the deal came from. But I think they could. I think they should have, because the drivers obviously did. There was a deal. They knew about the deal, and it was. When have you ever seen two cars completely side by side at Martinsville with this car for, was it 10 laps straight?
At least 10 laps in the final 15 laps.
I can't remember longer than 3.
Yep.
And these were with worn out tires. These were 100-lap old tires. So that's not happening. So it's obvious they were doing it. So,
and to your point, more importantly, two teams that are, of all 3 teams that are involved in this from a Chevy side, are key partner teams.
Yes.
And they're all 3 competing to be the top key partner team because they all want the most attention, the most funding. So they all saw this as an obviously
or more funding.
Or more funding. And so for sure you have
one time the RCR could be losing some.
Yeah, for sure you have to be thinking, if I do this, it's going to get me more wind tunnel time, more, access to data earlier. I don't even know all the things they possibly get from it, other than more financials in the back end to support and run my team, so that I can run my team in a more financially sound manner. But to your point, your important point there is, at no time can I think, in the past, even in Mark Martin's era in the early 2000s, when drivers would let each other go and come back and catch you later, that was within teams. You never really saw that, like, I'm going to let Jimmy Johnson go by me if I'm Mark Martin because I'm going to have to fight to pass him later, unless he absolutely had to. Where if he lets Kenseth go and they're racing for the lead, he knows that because they're in the same team, same manufacturer, that if I have a better car later, that favor is going to be repaid. These are 3 competing people, 3 competing drivers, 3 competing team owners, all competing for the same food at the same dog bowl with Chevrolet. And they're, the biggest one obviously is Hendrick with its stack of championships, and they're all actively working together. I don't know how you don't, like you said, who gave the order? You can't prove it with the radio communication where it came from. But when you look at 3 competing teams, how can you not deduce with common logical sense it had to come from the president of Chevy Racing for NASCAR? Yep. I don't know how it could come from anybody else, or their racing director for Chevy Racing.
And beyond that, you've got NASCAR basically saying they can't see any data that shows that the 24 would have went farther back. These cars came from a whole straightaway back and then just stopped.
And we left the 77 out of there.
There was 7 cars packed up behind them?
Yep, and we left the 77 out.
There's no way that he doesn't lose at least 5 of those spots, and that's the reason Bell was in that position to do what he did. Everybody's wrong, but that wrong doesn't happen without this one.
Agreed, 100%. That one definitely those actions precipitate the reason for Bell to have to make his decision. So they're the cause, without question. Because if they're not playing games, then the other side doesn't have to play the same games. And one thing you'll hear when you listen to it later in DJD that I hadn't really thought about, but really it's been since the I mean, you and I talk about it all the time, different scenarios when we have different conversations. But when I look behind me at my shelf of winner take alls and all the different people that have won the championships, there isn't a single year in the 10 years we've had this format that didn't have some type of controversy. You know, Newman using Larson the first year as a basically as a bumper, a pinball bumper to make his way in. You've got Harvick and Dega slowing down, taking out cars. You've got Kyle Larson, or not Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch not starting 11, 12 races and then
you got
winning the championship.
The one for 2020 where nobody ever heard the rule that the tire changer could reposition himself on the wall, and like if he went out too early, he'd go back and touch the wall and go back. Nobody had ever heard that before.
And that was also the same year that Harvick was put out because race manipulation. Chase and Harvick raced hard. Chase didn't like, this is back under the steel, the metal bodies. It cut Chase's
21.
tire down. He went out and blocked. Oh, you're right. That's 21, sorry. But again, race manipulation at Bristol, he goes out and blocks.
Yep.
If he doesn't do that, Harvick advances.
Yep, because he was mad.
Yep. So, I mean, when you go through the list.
Where's the 5? I'm going to go help him.
Yep. If you go through the list, I honestly can't think of a single one of these where we haven't had some kind of circumstance really that taints every single one of them. So then as a fan, from your perspective, my perspective, I mean, I'm thrilled Larson won a championship. I'm thrilled Harvick won a championship. But do you really feel good about it when, at least when Larson and Harvick won it, they were the dominant cars their year. Harvick was hands down that first year at SHR, the class of the field. So it was good that he won
5 or 6 more races that year.
Yep.
That I can think of right now.
Yep. Larson, when he won his 10 races, and he could have beat Gordon's record of 13 easily that year. There was a handful he gave away for sure.
I looked back at one time, and it was like 17, 18 he could have won if things just changed just a little bit. Where he dominated and something changed. Dover, Kansas coming to mind right off the bat, just where it just fell apart near the end. So,
yep.
But yeah.
But I mean, if you're looking at it, I've been a fan of the sport for 30 plus years. You've been a fan of the sport for almost the same amount of time. When you look at this 10-year period, is this a 10-year period of the sport that you as a fan are proud of? I don't know that I am. Like, I have a hard time when I argue with somebody about
I can only
F1.
Look back at 21 and to answer this, and just my nerves for the championship race. My driver, Kyle Larson, had won 9 races, and he was running 4th in the championship race. And I'm sitting there going, this dominant season, he would be leading the points in the old format. He'd be leading the points in the chase format. And we're sitting here 4th with 35 laps to go and not going to win the championship because of this Mickey Mouse championship stuff.
Yeah, with 9 races, could have been 12, 13 races.
But that was my thoughts before. This is how this is going to end, really?
Yep, the Cinderella story is going to end with somebody who has 9 trophies to their hand, led all stats that year by a large margin, like got in that Hendrick car and smoked the field. And absolutely lived up that first year to everybody's arguments that he's the best race car driver in the world. And that's only grown since then. He stepped on his toes a couple times this year, but I mean, you and I talked about it. He could easily have a pile of wins this year beyond the 6 he's got now. He should probably have 10 to 12. Again, if he just exercised a little patience here and there, they make one decision different, what could be.
And that's what most of the, Harvick's podcast and a couple others, they don't understand why you would not want, or why Larson's not in this final race. It's kind of, you base. I think it was Mark Martin who said you've got the they say winning matters. That's what they want this to be. Winning means everything.
Yep.
And the driver that has double the amount of wins than anybody else in the field is not in your championship race.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense?
Yep. Double the wins, leads every stat column there is: top fives, top tens, laps led, average running speed, like across the board. He is the number one in almost every category this year. And he holds the record for the majority between him, Hamlin, Byron, but Larson, by a large margin, holds the majority of stats in this car across the board, period. Again, and he's not going to be a part of your conversation. That's just insane.
And to go with that, Christopher Bell is probably number 2 in those stats.
Yep,
I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure he is.
I remember looking at that grid. He was on there for several as well.
And I did this for you the other night. I did the top 10 for the current type of points, stage breaks, all that stuff. The current points, the way they do now with the chase format, and it's Christopher Bell, William Byron, Kyle Larson, and the 12. And 2 of those people are not in the 4. It's mind-boggling that we're gonna have Joey Logano, who was he 17th or 18th in points when they started, like when they got to the break?
Well,
the 10,
yeah, and he had
10 to go. He was technically 18th in points, and now he's in the final 4.
Joey doesn't surprise me because of their performance in the past, but I agree to say that they are a title contender and have been a title contender all year is not true. Blaney, at least his performance record matches his performance record from his championship year and the years leading up to it. They always seem to get hot starting toward the final third of the year. The races leading into the championship and then the championship 10 race stretch. And the Fords have been kind of like that the last handful of years, so it's not completely out of sync, but I mean, you're definitely not rewarding season-long performance enough, clearly, because Tyler Reddick, regular season champion, with the benefit of Larson missing the 600 due to Mother Nature. If Larson doesn't miss the 600, Reddick's not the season-long champion, so then you've even got a bigger black eye as NASCAR with your season-long champion and race leader.
If NASCAR, they kept Christopher Bell's penalty on Sunday, which, I mean, he did do it, whatever. And then they looked at the Chevy thing and they go, we need to look at lap times and throw a penalty on, even though, just like Truex didn't do anything, but he got a penalty. You got to look at 24, and you got to look at the speeds they were running before the 3 and the 1 and the 6 and the 77 caught him and whoever else was there.
Yeah. Looking at the SMT data, the telemetry data.
If you put him back 5 spots, Bell is in on driver points, and the 5 is in on owner points. And that's another thing they probably looked at. They didn't want to have a situation like they did 2 years ago where the 5 was in for the owner's title and the 9 was only in on the driver's title.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's already, they don't like that it's becoming confusing to fans. It's harder to align. One of the, even though they don't come out and say it, it's you can deduct it logically. But something you touched on that definitely is important is, so back to the penalty portion, NASCAR felt a penalty was warranted. That means you believe they did something wrong. For the level of penalty you're handing out, it's not a slap on the wrist, but it definitely doesn't have the teeth that I think it would deter it. I mean, we'll find out, but I don't think it's going to stop it from happening again.
Well, Jeff Gluck said it earlier. This is not going to keep teams from doing it, and they'll do it again soon.
Yep. And so if you felt they did something wrong, what did they do wrong? Come out and say what they did wrong. You're telling us that you don't like what they did, but you don't think what they did was severe enough to take somebody out of the championship. I I feel like you're saying they're wrong, but we don't want to have a controversial decision, kind of like in 2013 when they added Gordon to the
I
championship.
think that's part of it. So they had that thing in 2013, and the backlash they got from adding Gordon, taking Truex out, all that. The backlash they got from that, they didn't want it to happen again. The problem is on Sunday night, they took 30 minutes to decide that what we all knew, the 20 rode the wall.
Yep.
But for some reason, and with all of these people making all these decisions, nobody could walk in and open that door and go, "Hey, did you see what Chevy did?
Yep.
Did you see what
Have you
Chevy was
heard?
saying?
Have you heard the
NBC is
audio
showing
that's
it.
being played
Have you
right
looked
now?
at this?"
Yeah.
They could have taken another hour
Yep.
and looked at that and see, they made their decision, so they don't want to undo it because of 2013. I think that's what it is. They made a decision in 2013, and they got backlash, so they made a decision here. They put Byron in, and they don't want to undo it
And
because
they got to live with it.
of 2013.
So another thing to think about, and I'm curious how you see it, but we're at the last race of the current TV contract. We're going into the start of the new TV contract. Do you think that has any bearing on their decision as well? Like, do we really want to taint the start of our next relationship with? We've got new partners and old partners, so we want as much ratings as possible, but we also don't want to put a negative taste in their mouth when we're getting ready to start a, 10 billion 7 year deal. I think it's 10 billion. It might be 8. Either way, they're getting more money than they've ever gotten before per race for less content. And you're getting ready to kick that off, and you're at the final race
Way less content
for
at
way less
that.
content, and we'll get into that in a future episode, you and I. But you're ending one deal, starting another, and your championship race that's supposed to be the crowning achievement for the year, what should be the second most important race of the year, is going to be overshadowed unless something drastically different changes at Phoenix. Will be overshadowed in fans' minds. I know it will be in mine because you're going to be looking at it, especially if a Byron wins. The other three, they won their way there. I I don't have to like it, the current format, but at least they did what they had to do. They won their way there. Blaney went up there and he took it. Joey Logano and them used strategy. Paul Wolf is really good at that. You saw it when he was paired with Brad Keselowski, and Keselowski would literally push in the clutch, coast through the corner at Kentucky. That's how he won there. And then, he would do that at Pocono and these places, and he was able to milk the gas. Well, Joey was his teammate at the time. He learned from him, so of course Joey's good at that. And then that's how Reddick won his 2 championships, was riding the wall. So, I mean, for Xfinity. So, of course he's good at Homestead, just like Larson. And if Larson doesn't make that mistake, Reddick's probably not in, more than likely, and Larson is in. If he had just been a little more patient.
If Larson just rode in second, he'd be in as well. That was a 12-point swing.
Yep.
He missed the vote for 7 points.
So I just think it's going to be hard come Sunday when you're watching it for these 4 to really pick one and say, from who out of those 4, who's really a deserving champion when you look at all of this mess. When your best drivers, other than probably Reddick, aren't represented.
Deserving, the only one in there in my eyes that is deserving is the one who got it last year, and he did the same thing this year. He came in to Martinsville and flat kicked their ass.
Yeah.
He did the same thing last year. He did it this year, and the 22 don't deserve it. We spoke about that earlier. But the 12 deserves the shot. The 45 with his, beginning of the year, he did win the regular season title. He deserves to be there. I'm not so sure with his Martinsville performance was just. What was he, 3 laps down? 4?
Yeah, they were awful.
I know you're in, but what are you doing?
For me, with the surprising thing with Reddick there, and all drivers have weaknesses and strengths. Reddick has not always been a short track guy, but what I don't understand is you're driving for Denny Hamlin, one of the winningest drivers at that track, and you have a partnership with JGR. How are you this bad at that track? All the other JGR cars were fast in qualifying, in practice, until Denny wrecked his car, and then he was able to come from the back. So it's not like you don't have somebody you can turn to in that scenario and say, how do I drive this track? And not just him. You've got Truex. Truex was super fast. If they don't have that penalty, they're at least in the conversation. You know, once he got put back, he self
He looked like
destructed.
he was all over the place after that penalty.
Yeah, once he got back in
He was
traffic,
overdriving. I don't know.
I think he just self destructed like he does sometimes when he gets in his own head, and he's just ready to be done. I think if this is
he's ready to go fishing.
I think if this is 3 years ago, you maybe get a different result from him there prior to that. But I mean, Ty Gibbs' inexperience is the only thing that hurt him.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So you asked about the TV.
Yeah. So back to the TV. Do you think the TV deal plays a part in their decision?
It might take a part, but they forget just because we're not hillbilly race fans anymore. We know what's going on. We have X at our fingertips. We have the internet at our fingertips. You got Jeff Gluck and George Bianchi out there that is showing us all these details and others, and we know what's going on. So we had, NBC had excellent coverage the other night showing all the stuff that's going on. So they might have done it for the TV perspective, but whether they can't back out, can they? Those contracts are signed, so there's
No, I don't think the TV partners
Amazon
can back out, but
so,
I think that I do think there's something to the upcoming TV deal. Like, we're trying to end on a high note, show you that there's a reason why you're paying the money that you're paying to get this content, because all their arguments are that ratings are up, viewership is up. And that's something I want to, you and I to sit down and talk about as we lead into next season for whatever we're going to call our podcast. But, one thing Denny Hamlin said in Action is Detrimental, I think you said you finished that one or got to hear it, was that he has yet to see concrete evidence that the changes they have made support the format the way it is today. And when I look at how much, to your point, I think that the people in the booth still look at it like the race fans are not informed, and I think they're wrong. I think this is the most informed race fan base that NASCAR has ever had, because you have so much content at your fingertips. You have Dale Jr., so you have a past driver, race winner, team owner in Xfinity, and his staff of analytics personnel. You have Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi, who are behind the scenes gathering information. You've got Bob Pockris, and all this stuff is on X. Then you've got all these podcasts. Then you've got the personalities on Sirius XM, where you've got Larry Mack and Daniel Trotta, and these people that were part of the TV groups are in the garages and the pits in various capacities. Denny Hamlin is a team owner disclosing information. So if you consume the information like you and I do, and I have to make the assumption that they don't consider us the average race fan. We are obviously the minority in their mind. But if you consumed all this information, I don't know how they think what they've just made a decision on, whether it's the penalties here, the putting Byron in, whatever, that what they're doing is working.
It's not working for me.
Same. I find I watch it less than I have ever watched it. And I think when it comes to the sport as a whole, I think I consume as much NASCAR as I ever have. I think what I consume is totally different. I don't consume the race. I consume all the information that comes after, because the discussion after is almost more entertaining than the race itself, and that's a problem
really
in itself.
That's
a big
problem.
problem.
It is. I'll be honest. When it comes to consuming a race, I hardly watch the I will go back the next day and watch the race again.
Yeah.
And actually try to consume it more than what I did on race day. On race day, I'm riding on board with my favorite driver, listening to the spotter, the crew, and I'm watching the TV, but I'm also watching the onboard of my car, and so when it when it comes to that, that means that I'm more car focused than I am the race, because they don't broadcast like they did in the late '90s. Me and you have talked about this before, but for our audience, if you and I always bring this race up because I've kind of went back a couple times just to view how awesome, because I know that for that race for a fact did it, and it was a '98 Vegas race.
Mm-hmm.
The first 50 laps of that race, they were showing battles for 32nd on I think it was CBS or ABC, but they were showing battles.
Yeah, I think it was ABC.
If there was a battle, they were showing it, and there was battles for the first 50 laps, just everywhere, and they were going from first to. You had lead change every 4 laps. But even when there wasn't lead changes, they were going back to 32nd, looking at Kenny Irwin or whoever else was back there to see what was going on. These new broadcasters need to bring that back. I really hope Dale Jr. does that with Amazon and TNT and says we need to look back at what's going on at 30th, especially at the beginning of the race. They actually did do a decent job this weekend with Denny Hamlin.
Yep. Well, that's the key. You had a person fighting for a spot that was in part of that conversation. I think if Denny's not back there as one of the championship 8 field at the time, then they probably don't pay as much attention. They probably still give him a couple frames, but if he's not making big moves, he methodically worked his way up there. Not as fast as I was expecting him to, based on his practice speed, but we started cooler than we practiced temperature wise. So
I also think there was some damage they probably didn't see. I mean, I'm sure
I agree.
He did back it in kind of hard, and I think there was probably slight damage they probably couldn't see even with, using all the tech they have.
Yeah.
They definitely couldn't. There's no way that car was 100% like it was before the crash. There's no way.
No, I would say if I had to guess, based off the performance, in the practice, and again, people improve from practice, but in practice, he was the class of the field. And then after they backed it in, and that was early in practice when it was hot, but once he backed it in and they, basically took the whole thing down to the rear clip, made sure all the geometry and everything still aligned with the, the room of death, going through all the laser scans, and then they put the car back together externally. At best, they probably got it back to 95%, and they felt maybe 95% was better than their 100% backup. We'll never know, but I agree. I don't think it was anywhere near as good as it was before. Because he even said it himself. He didn't have anything that he felt like he could fight with compared to what Blaney and them had, or Larson or Chase.
So. Yeah, I don't think that. I don't know. They say these cars are exactly the same and everything, but I have a hard time believing that these days with how well, like you just said, that car was growing the corner so good in practice. And I think that's the only reason they stuck with it. And it still rolled the corner good. It just didn't have long-term speed.
Yeah, the fall off was pretty bad.
Yeah, and who knows? Like I said, maybe something in that crash they didn't see that they possibly could have done better with a backup. They could have just put the same setup under, maybe threw the same exact shocks from that car, so on and so forth, and potentially had maybe done better. But there was nobody beating the 12 yet on Sunday.
So, I guess to put a bow on it, from a penalty standpoint, going into this week, do you think they did enough to prevent somebody from doing something similar for Phoenix? Maybe they're not as obvious about it, but ensuring their manufacturer. I mean, you've got 2 bullets for Ford, 1 for each of Chevy and Toyota, and Chevy at least still has a bullet in the Chevy lucked out and they got a bullet in the fight they weren't going to get one otherwise, based on how everything was unfolding at the end. Larson's tires giving up, Chase's tires giving up, and Blaney just coming on like a monster. If I'm Toyota and I lost my second spot due to these actions, would you be like, you know what, gloves are off? Because think about it, Toyota is down a championship from 2016 with that phantom BS caution that ultimately resulted in Jimmy Johnson's seventh and resulted in Carl Edwards walking away. And really, have we seen since 2016 any measurable change in the integrity of the sport since then? What do you think?
I don't believe so.
So if you feel like there hasn't been enough,
see FRM step up and be a good little brother and block every chance they get, and just do it without saying anything. Because they got really good rear view cameras now. So anytime you see somebody coming up on Logano or Blaney, you just kind of, got in the way just a little bit.
Yep, got loose.
Down a couple tenths.
Because they talk all the time about how you have to hit the line
it's
just
a flat track
areas.
And they don't do well there.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing, I would expect everybody's going to be watching like a hawk, all the different partners and the teams as a result, which again taints the whole race if that's what you're looking for. Instead of this compelling straight up fight between four drivers and teams, you're going to be looking the whole time for any type of impropriety because you just had it. And so you're going to immediately question the outcome just out of human nature at this point, I think, which leaves a bad taste in your mouth no matter who the four drivers are.
If we don't see some sort of quote unquote accidental block at some point Sunday, I'll be supremely shocked.
Same.
Even after this week, $600,000 that's candy money for these teams.
Yep, it's a lot of money, but
teams it happened to. How much is Jordan worth? They're like, okay, here you go.
Yep.
Ouch, that hurt. Please don't.
Yep. I'm already suing you. Okay. Yeah. I'm already in a court where if I win this case, I stand to make a windfall of money. That's the goal, obviously. Another topic for another time, but
so you said to wrap it up, but so real quick before we get off here, who's your pick? Who? I know me and you have joked about scenarios that would basically give the finger to NASCAR or whatever, but or to this title, because with the Logano stuff and the Reddick with the team suing, who do you think is actually going to win, and what scenario would you like? So, two-part answer: what scenario would you like to happen?
I think Blaney's going to win, based off last year's performance and the one before that, where he basically ran second to Logano the entire time, and has run so well there in the past. I think the only difference there is this time they're both eligible, so maybe that backfires. But I think Blaney's going to be.
And Logano has had 3 weeks in a sim, knowing that nothing else matters.
Yep, knowing that nothing else matters. So now it's going to be, Penske. That's the one. So to touch on that for 1 second, Penske has proven they are the king in the garage, no question, about working together above all the other teams. Blaney helped Logano draft and extend his fuel mileage, gets Logano in. Logano, in turn, I'm sure did whatever Blaney wanted in the sim for Martinsville, as well as during practice and changes throughout the race, to help them get where they needed to go. Reporting tire mileage and all those different things. So I think the championship goes through one of those two. As far as which one I want to see win it, more than anything, I want Tyler Reddick to win it. Just because I want NASCAR to have to hand a championship trophy to Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, who are going to be sitting across the aisle from them in a courtroom very soon, suing them for antitrust. It'll make for a hell of a storyline. And
there's no way Steve Phelps is smiling while handing that
no.
trophy over.
Well, I mean, they didn't even
like
show up to give Tyler Reddick the
championship.
regular season championship trophy. They have to show up to give out the whole season.
They have to show up, but there's no way he's going to be smiling. No way.
Yep.
Absolutely. They're just going to be grunting and congratulations, well earned, blah, blah, blah.
You know, I was in Miami in 2018 when Joey won it, and standing there in front of the stage with Mitch and my dad, watching how long those executives were on stage and all the celebration. And that celebration went on for quite a while. I don't know how long TV showed it because we were there in person, but I mean, it was on the front stretch, then it was up on the stage, and it was out in the Victory Lane area, and then back out in the, seeing Todd Gordon with his mom. And it was a long, long event, as it should be. I mean, you just won a championship. I do not expect to see NASCAR executives hanging around very long if 2311 wins tops. Yep, they'll be like, okay, how fast can we push through this? Which event was it where they didn't? Was it when Brian? Yeah, it was when Brian France was on his way out, where he didn't even stay to hand Jimmy his ring. Remember? Yep. Like that was crazy.
So I agree with you. That's what I want.
Yep.
What I think will happen, I agree that the 12 will probably win it. I think there's a chance to 22 with the 3 weeks of, 3 solid weeks of sim time and able to work and finesse on that car. Possibly him. But
yeah.
I'm basing this off of New Hampshire and New Hampshire only. William Byron, yes, he has won Phoenix in the spring when we first brought this car out. I think was it 22 he won?
Yeah.
Okay, so he won there, and he came in 5th or 6th last fall. But they're bringing the New Hampshire tire, if I recall right. Is that correct?
That's, I believe, what they said. They said they're not bringing the tire they're running at Martinsville. They pulled the garage, and even though the garage wanted to bring the garage, I know Christopher Bell said in an interview he likes the option tire, but he doesn't think that race is when you should introduce it as a variable.
Right.
But I don't know if he was talking about as you bring in 2 options or just bring that tire with it being untested.
It's just going to be 1 tire.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the New Hampshire tire, and William Byron was nowhere to be found at New Hampshire. Yes, There's been, 5 months since then, but I don't think he has a chance to beat the 12 or 22. And I don't think the 45 has a chance either. I hope he does, but I think it's 12, 22, 24, 45 ended up in that order.
So you think Byron will better Reddick out of that?
Yes, only because of this week's performance and.
Okay. All right. I mean, I can see it either way.
He doesn't really do that well at flat tracks.
I agree with you then. I can see either way that way just because of the short track performance for both. Byron was up there. He did lead some laps, but ultimately his teammates outclassed him. And Bowman was, a little further back. But in terms of where I think the reason, if I have to pick Byron's position, I think he comes up last of the 4. Because when you look at who he's facing off against, just in those 4 people alone, and those other 3, they've all managed to rise to the challenge one way or another and win a race. And in the 10 races leading up to it, the 1 cutting off coming in, and then the 9 races succeeding it, you and I talked about it separately, but Byron hasn't closed out a race win and put together a whole race since Martinsville in April. His teammates, meanwhile, have all won. Larson winning multiple times, and the people that he's racing against have all won multiple races since then.
Yep.
And have consistently delivered and put up the numbers.
The 22 and the 45 better be so glad the 20 did not get.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think if the 20 is in,
he lights out the spring.
Yeah, I think if the 20 was in, we would have a hell of a show between the 12 and the 20 and the 22 right behind him. But I mean, Reddick did lead laps earlier there this year, so we definitely aren't getting
Yeah,
the four
that
best
was a
cars.
totally different tire. That's why I changed my. That's why my outlook is different, because it's the New Hampshire tire this time and not the tire they had in the spring.
Okay. So we're going to go for more than likely a Penske sweep of the next gen, 3 for 3.
Yep.
Probably going to be a repeat champion in Blaney. And we both agree for the ultimate, FU to NASCAR with all the drama.
Yes.
We want Reddick.
Also, if Blaney does win, it'll be the first back-to-back champion under this format.
Very true. And I think it will be the. Will it be? Let me look at my row of 10 cars up there.
It'll be the first time somebody's repeated since Jimmy.
Yeah, it'll be the first time anybody's repeated since Jimmy, and it'll be the first time that any manufacturer, or not manufacturer, manufacturer and team has gone more than 2 consecutive. Because Larson and Chase for Chevy back-to-back. Before that it was Toyota. Or no. Well, let's see. I'm looking at my row here. So
You're right.
Logano
19 was Kyle Busch.
Yep, 19. Okay, so 19 was Kyle Busch. 20, Chevy with Chase. 21 with Larson. 22 with the 22 and Ford. 23 for 12 with Ford. So no manufacturer and no team has done more than 2 consecutive. So if Logano wins, Penske wins 3 consecutive titles. It's been a long time since any manufacturer or any team has won 3 consecutive. You have to go back to Jimmy's run for that.
A run of 5.
Yep.
Crazy wins in a row.
Which has been quite a while now. And then a long time before that. And then if Blaney does it, it'll still be Penske with 3 in a row, but it'll also be the first back. So there's a lot of really interesting storylines with that in terms of the evolution of this car.
Yeah, but the coolest one would definitely be if the 45.
Yeah. It'll also suck because we won't get a diecast more than likely.
Yeah, we will not get a diecast of the Beast Unleashed because Monster.
I do wonder if he were to win, if they would let up enough, knowing that Lionel and NASCAR want to sell that merchandise. Maybe you have to buy it through 2311, but maybe they could be pushed enough. And, you have to be an adult to buy it because they don't want to push energy drinks to kids or whatever BS reason they're not doing it is, licensing, whatever. So if he does win, I'll remain hopeful until they say no. But
because none of us have ever seen a 12-year-old with a Monster in their hand.
Right, exactly. No, you wouldn't see that at a NASCAR race ever.
Ever.
So, yeah, looking at that row of winner-take-all champions.
There's a lot of amazing custom builders out there, though, so...
Yeah, we know one. He just happens to hate Toyota.
And he won't do it because he hates Toyota.
Yeah. And, well, he kind of hates you and me, too, so I guess that might be a problem.
Darn.
All right. Well, I think that was a good conversation for our first scenario. We'll see how this comes out audio-wise, but I enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to stop recording and we'll get this uploaded. See what everybody says.